The sun rose like it always did, quiet, golden, and full of false promises. Birds chirped outside suburban windows. Coffee machines hissed in kitchens. The world, on the surface, looked normal. But beneath that calm, everything was about to change. In downtown Chicago, 29-year-old Ethan Mercer sipped his black coffee as he scrolled through his news feed. A few odd headlines caught his attention. Mysterious illness spreads rapidly in small Eastern European town, hospitals overwhelmed, patients display aggression, no pulse. Clickbait, he muttered, setting his phone down. He had a long shift ahead at the emergency dispatch center. Nothing unusual ever happened there, just noise complaints, accidents, the occasional robbery. Routine. But this wasn't going to be a routine day. Across the city, Dr. Lena Reyes, an infectious disease specialist at Westbrook Medical, reviewed a patient chart with a frown. The man in quarantine had been brought in late last night, non-responsive, body temperature below 80 degrees Fahrenheit, skin pale and cold. Yet his eyes had moved. In his mouth, he had tried to bite a nurse. No signs of brain activity, but he moves, she whispered to herself, confusion tightening her chest. This doesn't make sense. Nurses had begun whispering. One claimed she saw the man get up and slam himself against the glass of his containment room. Others brushed it off as fatigue. But Lena had seen it herself. She was running blood tests and scans, but the data made no sense. This wasn't a virus. It was something unnatural. By 10 a.m., emergency calls were flooding Ethan's desk. First, a report of a man biting someone at a bus stop. Then another, from a school where a teacher was attacked by a student who had gone insane. Then another. And another. The calls didn't stop. Ethan's fingers flew over the keyboard, logging each one, dispatching help, but his stomach sank with every word he heard. Something was wrong. Deeply, terrifyingly wrong. A voice cracked through his headset. It was Officer Tanya Blake from the 14th Precinct. Dispatch, this is Blake, we've got a situation down at Riverfront Park. People are attacking each other, bleeding, screaming. We've got officers down. Send backup. Now. Then static. Officer Blake, repeat, Blake? Do you copy? Ethan asked. Nothing. The line was dead. By noon, chaos had taken root. Westbrook Medical had gone dark. Calls from inside the hospital described screaming, power failures, and blood, so much blood. A security guard whispered into his phone, hiding in a closet, breath trembling. They're not dying. I shot one 3 times, and he got up again. His voice cut off in a wet gurgle. Dr. Lena Reyes never made it out. Her last note, scrawled in blood across the wall of the isolation wing, read, "It spreads through bites. Burns don't kill them. Head trauma only. Save yourselves." Ethan's emergency center became a war zone of phone calls and panicked staff. The room buzzed with fear. Then, the power flickered. Sirens echoed outside, police, fire, ambulance, but no one was answering. "Ethan," a voice whispered from behind. It was Maria, his coworker. Her face was pale, and she clutched her phone. "My brother's at St. Jude's. He says the dead are walking. He saw it. People eating each other, tearing each other apart." Ethan swallowed hard. This wasn't clickbait. This wasn't a prank. It was real. By 3 p.m., the National Guard had set up blockades, but it was already too late. The infection had spread like wildfire. Cities were falling. Social media exploded with videos, people screaming as pale, bloodied figures sprinted through streets, tackling victims. Some fought back. Most didn't survive. Government officials urged calm. But their voices trembled. Flights were grounded. Martial law declared. Borders closed. In a matter of hours, the world had gone from normal to something no one had ever imagined. And as night approached, darkness brought with it something worse than silence, the sound of scratching at doors, of moaning in the distance, of the realization that humanity's greatest challenge had arrived, not from war or politics, but from the grave itself. The city skyline burned. Fires raged through buildings once filled with life. Black smoke curled into the sky like the breath of death itself. Sirens wailed in the distance, some fading, others abruptly cut off. Streets that had buzzed with morning traffic now crawled with figures dragging torn limbs and blood-stained clothes. Ethan Mercer stood on the roof of the emergency dispatch building, clutching binoculars in trembling hands. From up here, the full horror unfolded before his eyes. Cars crashed and abandoned. Bodies in the streets. And those things, those former people, wandering, searching, feeding. He lowered the binoculars, his mind screaming for answers that didn't exist. "They're everywhere," Maria whispered beside him. Her hands clutched a radio tight against her chest, but the static was all they'd gotten for over an hour now. No one's responding anymore. Not the police. Not the military. It's like everyone just stopped. Ethan nodded grimly. He had watched 2 National Guard trucks roll past earlier, then get ambushed. Soldiers screaming. Gunfire cracking. And then silence. The infected swarmed like ants, fast and relentless. Tactical gear didn't stop them. Only bullets to the head seemed to make any difference. Downstairs, some of the remaining staff huddled in the dispatch center, hoping help would arrive. But help wasn't coming. Not now. Maybe not ever. "Generators dying," Ethan muttered. "We need to leave this place. This building's a beacon. If they hear noise, if they smell us, they'll come." Maria didn't argue. She looked like she wanted to cry, but the tears were long gone. Fear had dried them out. Together, they headed downstairs, where a small group of 6 survivors waited, 2 EMTs, an intern from City Hall, a janitor named Ray who was armed with a rusted fire axe, and an old security guard, Hank, who hadn't spoken a word since morning. "The whole city's gone," Ethan said quietly. "If we stay, we'll be trapped. We make for the outskirts, there's a fire station about 7 blocks north. Could be supplies there. Radios. Maybe even a truck." Ray snorted. 7 blocks? You seen what's out there? That's suicide. You got a better plan?" Ethan shot back. Ray didn't respond. The group prepared in silence. Makeshift weapons, metal rods, fire extinguishers, even a broken chair leg. Hank loaded his sidearm slowly, as if each bullet was a memory he had to relive. The building's front door was already blocked with desks and filing cabinets, but the back stairwell led to the alley. It was narrow, shadowed, and silent. Until the silence was broken. A sound echoed up the stairwell, low, wet, inhuman breathing. Then a thud. Then scratching. They were here. "Go!" Ethan barked. The group pushed into the alley, just as the stairwell door burst open behind them. A figure staggered out, skin gray and peeling, mouth hanging open, teeth red with fresh blood. Ray swung his axe, burying it into the creature's head. It dropped instantly. No scream. No pain. Just gone. Ethan didn't look back. The city had become a maze of nightmares. Every street they crossed was a game of life or death. One wrong move, one sound too loud, and they'd be swarmed. They ducked through an abandoned pharmacy, shelves stripped bare, blood on the tiles, a pair of dead bodies in the corner. One of them twitched. "Don't stop," Ethan said. "Just keep moving." By the time they reached the fire station, the sun was sinking low. The building stood like a fortress, metal doors, barred windows. But something felt off. Hank knocked softly. "Hello? Anyone inside?" No answer. He tried the door, it creaked open. Inside, the fire station was eerily quiet. Trucks were gone. Lockers stood open. Gear scattered across the floor. And at the far end of the room, the unmistakable sound of chewing. 3 of them. Feasting. Ethan raised a crowbar and charged. Maria flanked him, swinging a flashlight like a club. The others hesitated, but in a world like this, hesitation was death. The creatures fell after a brutal fight, one by one. Blood soaked the fire station floor, and Ethan could feel his pulse racing in his ears. But they were alive. They had made it. For now. But as Ethan locked the doors behind them, he knew the truth: the world wasn't safe anymore. No building could hold forever. No street was free from the infected. And no one, no matter how strong, how smart, how fast, was truly prepared for what was coming next. Because this was only the beginning. The fire station was quiet now. Too quiet. Outside, the world moaned, scratched, and shuffled. But within the station's reinforced walls, silence reigned, broken only by the faint hum of a failing generator and the distant cries of the undead echoing through the city. Ethan sat at the old communications desk, flipping switches and adjusting frequencies on a battered radio. His fingers moved quickly but without hope. For the past hour, he'd heard nothing but static. Still, he tried. "Is anyone out there?" he asked for the 100th time. "This is Ethan Mercer, civilian group in Station 47, downtown Chicago. We need assistance. Anyone receiving?" More static. Then, a crackle. He froze. "Ethan. Station 47, copy you." His eyes widened. "Say again." "This is Station 47. Who is this?" "National Guard Post. 12 miles west. Lincoln Industrial Park, temporary evac, supplies, survivors." The voice was weak, barely cutting through the static, but it was real. A destination. A chance. He repeated the message to the others. Maria's face lit up for the first time in hours. "That's west. If we can get a vehicle." "No vehicles left," Ray muttered. "Not without risking the streets. We'll have to go on foot." The EMTs, Jody and Sam, exchanged looks. "We could rig something up," Jody said. "There's an old utility cart in the garage. It's got a battery motor. Slow as hell, but it might get us halfway." "And then what?" Ray asked, arms crossed. "We run the rest of the way? Through a city full of flesh-eaters?" Ethan stood, voice firm. "It's better than sitting here waiting to die." Ray said nothing more. Over the next hour, they prepped the cart, gathered supplies, water, canned food, the last few medical kits. Sam stitched up a gash on Maria's shoulder from the earlier fight. Hank, the silent guard, cleaned his revolver with shaking hands. No one said what they were all thinking. The odds weren't in their favor. Just before they left, Ethan returned to the radio. "If you're still listening, we're coming. Hold the line." He switched it off and headed for the garage. The utility cart buzzed softly, a low hum compared to the chaos outside. They opened the fire station doors slowly. The city stared back at them, broken, burning, bleeding. The journey began. The cart moved at a crawl, barely faster than walking speed, but its silence was its strength. The group ducked under broken traffic lights, weaved through abandoned vehicles, and stayed low beneath the looming shadows of empty buildings. The infected were everywhere. Some wandered aimlessly. Others chased distant sounds. But most terrifying of all were the quiet ones, the ones who stood perfectly still, staring at nothing, as if waiting for something, or listening. Ray drove the cart, his eyes never blinking. Ethan and Hank walked beside it, weapons ready. Maria sat in the back, watching every rooftop, every shadow. They reached the halfway point, an overpass overlooking the train tracks, just before nightfall. That's when they heard it. A scream. Human. Close. "Someone's alive," Jody whispered. Ethan's heart twisted. "We can't leave them." Ray stepped in front of him. "We do this, we all die." Ethan pushed past him. "Then don't come." He followed the sound into a crumbling convenience store nearby. Shelves had been torn apart. Blood smeared the floor. In the far corner, a teenage boy was pinned under a metal rack. His leg twisted unnaturally, but his eyes were wide with terror. "They're coming," he cried. "Please, don't leave me." Ethan gritted his teeth and rushed forward. "Help me with this," he shouted. To his surprise, Ray was already there, yanking at the metal. Together, they pulled the rack off the boy. But the sound had drawn attention. Shadows moved outside the store windows. Groans rose in the distance, low at first, then building, like a storm. "They heard us," Maria called out from the cart. Ethan threw the boy's arm over his shoulder. "We run. Now." They sprinted back, Ethan dragging the boy, the group converging just as the first infected came into view. Pale eyes. Blood-soaked mouths. Hungry. The cart roared to life, wobbling under the weight of 7 people now. Ray gunned the motor, and it lurched forward. Behind them, the infected chased, relentless, clawing over each other, howling like animals. A scream. Then gunshots. Hank at the back, covering them. His revolver snapped again and again. Then a final bang. He was gone. But they kept moving. Darkness swallowed the city, and with it came a terrifying truth: nowhere was safe. Not anymore. But hope flickered in the distance, a signal, a promise of safety, of salvation. They didn't know what waited at Lincoln Industrial Park. But it was better than what chased them. And they had no choice but to keep going. The night was suffocating. The wind had picked up, scattering debris across the streets like the remnants of a broken world. The hum of the utility cart was the only sound that filled the tense silence as Ethan, Maria, Ray, Jody, Sam, and the injured boy pressed on. They had to reach Lincoln Industrial Park, their only shot at survival. But with every turn, every corner they rounded, it felt like the walls were closing in. Ray kept his eyes on the road ahead, his knuckles white as he gripped the cart's handle. His face, usually filled with sarcasm and biting remarks, was now drawn, haunted. No one spoke. They couldn't. The weight of Hank's death lingered in the air, a cruel reminder of how fragile they were in this new world. Ethan kept his focus on the boy, who was now lying in the back of the cart, his leg bound with strips of cloth. His face was pale, sweat glistening on his forehead as he stared at the sky above. His name was Jason, a 17-year-old who'd been living alone when the infection hit. He was lucky to have survived as long as he had, lucky, in a way, that they found him. "Jason," Ethan asked softly. "How long have you been out here?" Jason swallowed hard, his lips trembling. I don't know. A few days, maybe. I ran out of food. Saw them things, started coming out of nowhere. I thought I was the last one." Ethan didn't have an answer. He wanted to say something reassuring, but words felt empty in a world where everyone had lost something, or someone. Maria's voice cut through the silence. "We're almost there. Just a few more blocks." The urgency in her voice made Ethan's heart race. He glanced up at the dark horizon. The buildings ahead were distorted in the gloom, silhouettes of what had once been a thriving industrial area. It felt like they were walking toward a graveyard, not salvation. Ahead, the fire station's lights flickered in the distance. The group pushed on. As they approached a set of abandoned warehouses, a scream pierced the night. The sound of metal scraping against concrete followed, and then the unmistakable shuffle of the infected. "Get in the alley," Ray hissed. The group veered to the left, ducking into a narrow alleyway that reeked of oil and decay. They crouched low behind a stack of crates, trying to hold their breath. Ethan peeked around the corner. A group of infected, 5, maybe 6, staggered past, their eyes glazed and unblinking. One of them was dragging its leg behind it, leaving a trail of blood. Another had part of its face torn away, but it still stumbled forward, mindless, hungry. As the group held their breath, Jason shuddered in the back of the cart. "Please, don't let them see us," he whispered. Ethan nodded, watching the infected pass, hoping they wouldn't turn toward the alley. After what felt like an eternity, they finally disappeared into the shadows. Maria let out a long breath. That was too close. We can't keep doing this, Ray muttered, eyes scanning the surroundings. We can't keep hiding like this, hoping they don't see us. There's no future like this. Jody, the young EMT, glanced at him, her voice strained. What do you want us to do? Charge them? We can't afford to lose anyone else. Ray didn't answer. He didn't have to. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. They were running out of time. Resources. Hope. Ethan's thoughts drifted back to Hank's death. He had seen it happen. The old security guard had held the rear, shooting at the infected to cover their escape. He had fallen when one of the infected lunged, sinking its teeth into his throat. Ethan had wanted to run back, to help him. But the numbers were too overwhelming. They'd been forced to leave him behind. It was that kind of choice that wore you down, every day, every hour. A world where every life lost chipped away at who you were. We have to keep moving, Ethan said, voice hoarse. We're not dead yet. Jason raised his head, his face tight with pain. Where are we going? The place on the radio? The military? Ethan nodded. Lincoln Industrial Park. It's the closest thing to safety we've got. Jason's eyes filled with doubt. I don't know. What if it's already gone? What if we're too late? The question hung in the air, unanswered. Because Ethan didn't know. No one did. For all they knew, Lincoln Industrial Park was already overrun, just like the rest of the city. But they couldn't stop now. Not when there was still a chance. The group moved on, staying low as they navigated the streets. Every turn was a gamble. Every step took them closer to either salvation or death. By the time they reached the outskirts of the industrial park, dawn was breaking, painting the sky in shades of orange and red. But instead of hope, the light felt like a warning. Ethan stopped at the edge of the parking lot, staring at the gates of the compound. The fences were torn, the gates wide open. Inside, the buildings loomed, silent. Empty. No soldiers. No radio signals. No sign of life. Just a graveyard. His heart sank. It's gone. Maria stepped forward, her voice steady. We can't give up. There has to be someone here. We can't just stop. But Ethan didn't reply. His thoughts were clouded with anger, loss, and the crushing weight of survival. This was a world where you didn't get to save everyone. Where every corner held a new nightmare. And there was still no way of knowing what came next. The air was thick with despair. Ethan stood at the edge of the industrial park, staring at the empty compound. No soldiers. No supplies. No hope. The place that had been promised as a safe haven now seemed like just another hollow shell of a world long lost. Jason was the first to speak. What does this mean? If this place is empty. Ethan didn't look at him. He couldn't. It means we keep moving, he said, though his voice was hollow. We don't stop. We can't. Maria stepped forward, her eyes scanning the perimeter. The gates were wide open, like an invitation to death. She took a deep breath, masking her disappointment. Ethan's right. We can't let ourselves get stuck here. Ray, who had been standing in silence, finally spoke up, his voice bitter. Yeah? And where exactly are we supposed to go? This city's a war zone, and every place we've tried has been nothing but a graveyard. We're just walking into more death. Jody shot Ray a look. Shut up, Ray. That's not helping. But Ray wasn't backing down. I'm just being real. There's no point in running if there's nowhere to go. Ethan clenched his jaw. He didn't need to hear it. They all knew the reality, this wasn't a fight for survival anymore. It was a slow, inevitable march toward the end. But he wasn't ready to give up yet. Not when there was still a flicker of hope. We go south, he said, his voice firm. I've heard rumors of survivors down by the coast. There's a port city that might still be holding out. It's a long shot, but it's better than standing around here. Maria nodded slowly. We'll need more supplies before we head out. Ethan agreed. They couldn't just keep moving without provisions. So, they entered the industrial park cautiously, checking every building, every truck. But it was the same as before, empty, abandoned, decayed. The world was emptying out faster than they could run. Inside the main office, they found a map of the area, with scribbled notes and marked locations. Some were crossed out. Others were circled. Look at this, Jody said, pointing to a marked spot on the map. There's a medical supply warehouse nearby. If we can get there, we might find enough to last us a while. It was a long shot, but what else could they do? Ethan nodded, and the group set out again, their footsteps echoing in the empty streets. The sun had risen fully now, but it did little to brighten the atmosphere. The world outside felt like a prison of silence and shadows. Every street was an obstacle course of wreckage. Every corner could conceal an infected. As they moved through the industrial park, they heard noises, low groans, thuds, and shuffling footsteps. The infected were close. They'd been drawn to the open gates. Ethan held up a hand, signaling for the group to stop. They ducked behind a row of abandoned vehicles, waiting as a small group of infected shuffled past, unaware of their presence. It was always like this now, constant vigilance. No moment of peace. Every second was a risk. Once they were clear, they resumed their trek. The medical warehouse was just a few blocks away, hidden among the larger factories. When they reached it, the front doors were locked, but a side window was broken. Ray, ever the opportunist, wedged his crowbar into the frame and pried it open. Inside, the warehouse was eerily quiet. Boxes of medical supplies were scattered around the large room. There were no bodies, no infected. Just silence. This is it, Maria said, relief flooding her voice. We'll be okay for a while. Ethan felt a twinge of hope, but it quickly died as he turned toward the far corner. He spotted something that hadn't been there before. A figure. It was crouched by a shelf, scavenging through supplies. A woman, maybe in her 30s, her clothes torn and covered in dirt. She froze when she saw them. The air in the room thickened with tension. The woman didn't move, didn't speak, just watched them with wide, wary eyes. Ethan raised his hand slowly, trying to show that they weren't a threat. We're not here to hurt you. We're just looking for supplies. For a moment, it felt like time had stopped. The woman's eyes flickered between them, searching for any sign of danger. Finally, she lowered her hands, cautiously. I'm not with anyone else, she said, her voice raspy, strained. I'm alone. Her words sent a chill through Ethan. Alone. Just like so many others, she had lost everything. Maria stepped forward, offering a small smile. We're not alone either. We're survivors. If you're looking for help. I don't need help, the woman snapped, her voice hard. I'm just trying to survive. That's all we can do now, right? Survive. Ray eyed her carefully. Survive? In this world? What's your plan, lady? The woman's gaze hardened. My plan is to stay alive long enough to see the end. You don't get to ask questions in this world. Ethan didn't have the energy for a fight. He glanced at the others, silently asking if they should just take the supplies and leave. But Maria, ever the optimist, stepped closer. Look, we can help each other. We've got a destination. If you need to come with us, there's a chance we'll find other survivors. The woman hesitated, then shook her head. I don't need people. I just need to keep moving. The tension in the room was palpable. Ethan could feel the weight of the decision in the air. But there was no time to force anything. We're heading south, he said. The coast. If you change your mind, we're leaving in an hour. And just like that, the decision was made. They were once again alone. The world around them had turned cold. Even the possibility of connection seemed like an illusion now. With a final look at the woman, Ethan turned and walked back toward the door. The world was harsh, unforgiving. And all they could do was keep moving, step by step, toward whatever lay ahead. But one thing was certain: the longer they stayed in this desolate world, the more they were losing themselves in the process. The landscape was becoming all too familiar. The days had blurred together, long stretches of trudging through ruined streets, each corner a potential death trap, each shadow a reminder of the world they once knew. But with each day, they grew more accustomed to it, like soldiers adjusting to a battlefield where the enemy was always lurking just beyond sight. Ethan didn't know how much longer they could keep going. The group had reached a crossroads. They'd spent hours scavenging the medical warehouse, gathering enough supplies to last them a few days. But every moment spent in the warehouse had been a moment wasted. They hadn't found a safe place, no hidden refuge or stronghold, nothing that could offer them long-term security. The woman they had encountered, the one who had refused their help, had disappeared into the shadows. It had been a fleeting interaction, but it lingered in Ethan's mind. She had seemed so resolute, so willing to take on the world alone. Was it that simple? Was the only way to survive now to shut everything out and rely only on yourself? Do you think she'll be okay? Maria's voice broke through Ethan's thoughts. He looked at her, her face etched with concern. She had been the one to offer the woman help, the one who saw potential for something beyond just survival. But even Maria seemed to sense that offering help was a luxury they could no longer afford. "I don't know," Ethan said quietly. "I think she's beyond help." Ray snorted, his tone sharp. "She's smart. No point in sticking with us, right? We're just dragging our feet." Jody shot Ray a warning look. "You don't get it, Ray. You can't just give up on people." "People die," Ray snapped back, his eyes hard. "That's the world now. The sooner we all realize that, the sooner we can start thinking about what's really important." Ethan turned away, not wanting to argue. He understood Ray's point more than he cared to admit. They were all clinging to a fading thread of hope, but reality was setting in. The world had changed. No amount of optimism could rewrite that truth. As they moved through the city, the weight of their situation pressed down on them. They needed to make a decision. There were two paths ahead, one that took them further south toward the coast, where rumors of a port city filled with survivors had been circulating, and another that led to a small town just outside the city limits, a place some of the radio broadcasts had mentioned as a potential stronghold. Jason, still weakened from his injury, had grown quieter over the last few days. His eyes held a haunted look, the same fear that had settled in everyone. He had never seen a world without the undead. He had never known what it was like to have a future that wasn't defined by survival. "Ethan," Jason said, his voice low, "which way do we go?" Ethan glanced at the others. They all looked at him, waiting. It was his call now. They were all running on fumes, clinging to whatever hope they could find. The path they chose would determine whether they lived or died. Ray's voice broke the silence. "We're wasting time. I say we head south. We're never going to get out of this hellhole if we stay in the city." Maria shook her head. "We don't know what's down there. For all we know, the coast is just as dangerous. We can't rush into things without knowing what we're walking into." Jody added, "What about the town? The radio station said they were safe." It could be a better bet. Ethan felt the pressure building. Every choice seemed like it could be their last. The weight of leadership was becoming unbearable, and yet, there was no one else who could make the decision. No one else who could bear the burden of it. His mind kept coming back to the promise of the port city, hope, survivors, a chance for something beyond just survival. But the path to it was fraught with danger. And the town? It was a gamble, a place that might or might not exist as it had been described. A dead end or a false hope. Ethan knew the answer. He had to choose the greater risk. "We head south," he said finally, his voice steady despite the fear gnawing at him. "We can't waste any more time. The coast is our best shot." Maria and Jody exchanged glances, but neither protested. Ray gave a sharp nod, his face set in determination. Jason just stared ahead, his expression unreadable. And so, they continued their journey south. As they crossed the city limits, the landscape shifted. The ruins became more widespread, the remnants of civilization slowly fading into the wilderness. The asphalt was cracked, and overgrown plants crept in to reclaim the land. It felt like the world itself was healing, but in a way that no one could survive. Hours passed, and the weight of their decision began to settle in. The landscape stretched endlessly ahead, each mile a reminder that they were heading into the unknown. As dusk fell, the sky turned orange and pink, casting long shadows over the earth. The world was beautiful, but it had never felt more empty. Ethan's thoughts turned inward, wondering if they were making the right choice. Could they make it? Would they find what they were looking for? Or had they already passed the point of no return? His eyes wandered to the horizon. Somewhere out there, perhaps, there was still a chance for a new beginning. Or maybe, like so many others, they would find only more death. But there was no going back. They could only move forward. The world felt colder now. As they continued south, the landscape became more and more desolate. The sounds of the city were far behind them, replaced by an eerie silence that seemed to stretch for miles. Ethan could feel the strain in his bones, the constant vigilance wearing on him and the group. The weight of their choices was beginning to set in. The farther they moved, the more they felt like they were running from something rather than towards it. They hadn't spoken much in the last few hours, each person lost in their own thoughts, haunted by the ever-present fear of the unknown. Ethan had known when they left the city that this would be their last chance. There was no going back. The port city they were heading to could be a lie, or it could be a sanctuary. But it didn't matter anymore. They had made their decision, and now they had to see it through. By the time the sun had dipped below the horizon, the group had reached a clearing in the wilderness, a place where the trees seemed to stretch toward the sky, twisted and skeletal. A river ran through the clearing, its waters dark and still. It was the perfect place to stop for the night. They set up camp quickly, gathering what little wood they could find for a fire. But the peace didn't last long. From the trees, they heard the unmistakable sound of shuffling feet. Soft at first, then louder. It wasn't the wind. It wasn't just animals. Ethan's heart sank as he stood up, his eyes scanning the shadows. Infected, Maria whispered, her voice trembling. Ray was already grabbing his weapon, his eyes wide with panic. We need to move. Now. Ethan didn't need to think. He had seen enough of these creatures to know how quickly they could overwhelm you. They couldn't fight their way through a horde, not with their numbers thinned, not in this state. Get to the river, Ethan ordered. Now. The group scrambled into action, grabbing their packs and weapons, making a break for the water. The sounds of the infected grew louder. Ethan's pulse raced as they sprinted toward the edge of the river, the dark water reflecting the faint light of the dying fire behind them. They reached the riverbank and froze. The water was deep, swift, and cold. There was no bridge, no way across except by swimming. We can't swim across. Jody shouted, panic creeping into her voice. It's too dangerous. Ethan didn't waste a second. We have no choice. We either cross and keep moving, or we get trapped here. The shuffling noise was growing closer. The infected were almost on them. We have to swim, Maria said firmly, her voice steady despite the fear in her eyes. We'll make it across. We have to. The decision was made. They'd been cornered by the very thing they had been trying to avoid. It was the endgame now, and there was no way out except through. Ethan led the way, wading into the frigid water. The cold bit at his skin, but there was no time to think about it. They all followed, clinging to the hope that the current wouldn't drag them under. Halfway across, the infected reached the river's edge. Their twisted forms stood at the water's edge, groaning and reaching out with desperate hands. Their hunger was insatiable. Jason stumbled, his foot slipping on a rock. For a moment, Ethan thought he was going to go under, but Jason caught himself, a look of sheer determination in his eyes. They all kept moving. The water rushed around them, the current pulling at their legs, but they pushed on, making their way toward the opposite shore. The infected's guttural growls filled the air, but they were too far now to be a threat. They finally reached the other side, gasping for breath, shaking with cold and fear. They didn't stop to rest. They couldn't. The world was too dangerous for rest now. The clearing behind them was silent. The infected had been left behind, but the danger wasn't over. It never was. There would always be more of them, always another challenge to face. As they moved deeper into the wilderness, the night pressing down on them, Ethan couldn't help but wonder if they were making a mistake. But he knew one thing: they had no other choice. They had to keep going. And maybe, just maybe, they'd find the hope they were searching for. Somewhere out there, beyond the rivers, beyond the shadows, there had to be a place where the world hadn't completely fallen apart. A place where they could stop running. But no matter what, they couldn't stop now. They were survivors. And as long as they kept moving, they still had a chance. The end.